Here is a look at LakeFusion 5.0. There are three new features available: relationship management, reference data management, and complex data types. Complex data types let you define arrays in what Databricks calls structs. Basically, you can create any data structure you need. Now you'll notice this identifier attribute on our patient. That attribute is a customizable identifier list with several different types of values. When you map data to that, you can see how to map information from the source system into that array. It looks like the source data already has the same identifier data type, so that part's pretty straightforward. But you can also do a subfield assembly. If the upstream data doesn't match this structure exactly, just find the relevant information and map it to the individual elements. This way you can build that data type from different upstream sources. There are a few benefits here. First, all that data moves together in survivorship. So you can view survivorship and see how it's defined. Here's the identifier survivorship rule. It lets all those identifiers move together, and you can define a survivorship rule. You can select identifiers and create a survivorship rule for them. For example, you could use a source system survivorship rule like before, so that the whole set of identifiers can move independently. This is really helpful with addresses too. You can keep an entire address, like line 1, line 2, city, state, and zip, together. You can also use aggregation survivorship rules. Now you can concatenate identifiers together. If you have an array of structs, for example, that lets you build up entire arrays. I'll show you how this looks in the entity search by building up a patient. Let's take a look. You can see that this patient has two different identifiers. The whole structure is propagated throughout. You can build up multiple identifiers because this identifier was set as an array of structs. As you keep merging new records, you'll build up different identifiers over time for this one patient. Aliases are defined as an array of strings. You can keep adding to this array an array of aliases for this user. Over time, you'll see how multiple source systems get merged together. Right now, there's only one source system contributing to this record, but more can be added over time. The next feature in 5.0 is relationship management. Relationship management lets you govern not just the entities themselves, but also the relationships between them. You can create a brand new relationship between two entities. For example, you might set up a relationship between an organization and a payer. You can specify that this organization receives payment from that payer. This is a many-to-many relationship because one organization can have multiple payers, and one payer can pay multiple organizations. You can create the bidirectional label so you can see how an organization receives payment from a payer. For instance, you might label it as payment invoices an organization, or something similar. Then you can create that relationship. Now you can edit this relationship and add attributes on top of it. For example, for every payer that invoices an organization, you might want to include contract terms. You can give this attribute a label and set its type, like a string. Now, every relationship will need to have contract terms associated with it. This lets you track contract terms for every relationship. If each payer has a different contract with each organization, you can govern that here. If you have a lot of complex attributes, you might want to build out a contract master itself. But in many cases, just tracking this data here is enough. You can add a mapping. This lets you select a dataset that contains information about the mapping and pick the primary keys that let you track it. There are also optional built-in fields. For example, if you have a date field, you can use it to track the start and end date of the relationship and the status of that relationship. You can track all of that here. You can also map those contract terms, so you'll need data that tracks things like net 30 or net 45 terms, and you can map all of that here too. When you hit Add Mapping, that creates all the mapping, and you can create a data process to ingest that data. Once all that data exists, you can view it here in Entity Search. For example, you can open up a patient and look at their relationships. Now you'll see all of the relationships that this patient has. This patient might have relationships with different entities. You can pull it up and see exactly what relationships you've configured for this patient. You can see this patient has relationships with other patients. They're in a family with several other people. You can also see this patient has relationships with different conditions. That basically means this patient has a handful of conditions. This patient takes several different medications. There are some social risks, and this patient is covered by a specific payer. So there's a lot of different information about this patient that you're able to ingest and manage. This is really powerful because once you start managing and governing these relationships, it opens up a lot of analytical tools. You can use a graph analytics tool to analyze all these relationships. That's outside the scope of this demo, but can be shown by our team when you request a demo. It also lets you build risk indicators on top of these relationships. You can build business processes. If, for example, you need to build some business process based on the fact that this patient, Jennifer Nelson, is in a family with Mark Adams, then all sorts of things become possible. Not just analytically, but for process and operations, by governing all this information. The last feature available is reference data management. So, in the context of reference data management, most large enterprises have a lot of reference data to manage, not just master data. Reference data can be anything that's internal and gives context to transactions. For example, standard values like cardiology, family medicine, and internal medicine. Here you're referencing all the different specialty codes that need to be governed. Country codes, insurance products. There's a whole world of insurance products that someone offers and different statuses for product life cycles. There are a million different use cases for this, and you want to be able to govern that reference data. Then you want to link that reference data in the actual master data itself. So you can see there's the specialty code. If you open up master data in the provider section, then open a provider master record, you'll see you can standardize the specialty for every provider. Every provider will have a specialty, and you want to make sure their specialty actually matches that reference data. You can go and edit this provider and change any of their values. But since specialty is managed under reference data management, you can make sure that only values from the reference data are used. The incoming data that moves through your pipeline will check and make sure there's a match for that specialty in the reference data management. One pain point people run into when working with reference data is that not all their upstream systems always align exactly with the reference data as it's governed in LakeFusion. That's why you also build mappings from a source system value to the target value. You can even guess mappings and set thresholds for whether to auto-accept a mapping. For example, the incoming source system had gastro, and you think it matches to gastroenterology. But since it's below your 90% threshold, a data steward needs to review it. You can review this and say, yes, this looks good, and agree with the mapping. Then, every time you see gastro coming from provider ECAP, it will automatically map to your target value. Or if you disagree, you can go in and change the mapping. Maybe it should map to dermatology instead. That might not be correct, but you could save that change, and it would automatically map that incoming value to something else. If AB really stands for emergency medicine, not endocrinology, for the source system, you need to update this to emergency medicine. There it is, emergency medicine. Yes, now you can save that change. That will update the default mapping for that specific source system. When you approve this, the next time your pipeline runs, it will automatically update the mapping for all existing data. This is how you can govern not just the reference data, but also the mappings to that reference data. That helps ensure high-quality master data. Now, all your providers are governed to make sure you align with the right specialty code for each provider. Here are the top 3 takeaways. With 5.0, reference data, management helps you govern data quality in a more powerful way by managing relationships. You can now handle the true complexity of a large enterprise data model. Entities are no longer isolated. You're governing the relationships between them. This means you can manage things at a true conceptual, multi-domain level. With arrays and structs for complex data type management, you can model your underlying data much more flexibly. Overall, the theme is recognizing that enterprise data management is truly complex. LakeFusion is designed to handle the real complexities and messiness of your underlying data. Book a demo today at lakefusion.ai/contact.